In August of 2018, Taylor served as chair of the Sustainable Farming and Food Systems Program at Tompkins Cortland Community College in Dryden, New York. He has a broad academic and professional background in areas ranging from agricultural product development to national farm policy, organic farming systems, beginning farmer education, and the creation of agricultural standards. So he's going to introduce our next session, and so I hand it off to Taylor Reed.
Thanks, Jennifer. So the title of the session that we're here to see is Vietnamese and Iranian Flavors in Situ and Translated Abroad. And I'm a little bit embarrassed to admit this because I went to college for like 17 years, but I had to look up what in situ meant when I was told that I was going to moderate. How many of you know what in situ, how many of you don't know what in situ means? That's what I thought. So in situ means in its place of origin. And so what we're going to explore in this session is a couple of different cuisines and think about what it means to take a cuisine from the place where it was developed to some place that it's not native to. What does it mean for a cuisine to migrate? And what does that mean in terms of the ingredients? How do you deal with different ingredients? How do you deal with different agriculture? How do you deal with different environments? And how do you deal with different cultures as a chef? And so we have a couple of great chefs today to explore those issues with us. Andrea Nguyen is a cookbook author, a freelance writer, an editor, a cooking teacher, and a James Beard Award winner based in Santa Cruz. Both these chefs are from California, so we'll be able to explore California cuisine a little bit in very different cultural contexts. And Hanif Sadr is a chef and the co-founder of Comage Food Group, which is a northern Iranian restaurant group in the Bay Area. He trained as a materials engineer in Iran, and then when he came to the US to do a graduate degree, he decided he wanted to be a cook. So I'm going to turn it over first to Andrea to get started with her demos. And while we're doing this, I hope to have some rich conversation about the issues that the session explores.
To all of the staff of the World of Flavors Conference and for that wonderful introduction. I'm so happy to be here with you in this room right after Pierre Thiam was here because unbeknownst to you, there is like this rich cultural connection between Senegal and Vietnam. And it really has to do, I know Taylor, right? Surprise! It has to do with the dish that I'm going to demo today. So when you think about Vietnamese food, you think of three gateway dishes: pho, noodle soup, banh mi sandwiches, and gỏi cuống, rice paper rolls. The unfried ones, the ones that are oftentimes called summer rolls or spring rolls, they're just gỏi cuống in Vietnamese, salad rolls. Now, those are dishes that you would eat on the street. You would eat morning, noon, and night. But there is this other roll that we eat on special occasion, and it's called chả giò. It's deep fried in traditional ways. But when my family came here to the United States, and what you'll hear from me today versus what you'll hear from Hanif are two different experiences of coming to the United States in different times of our lives. So I arrived here as a refugee immigrant at the age of 6 in April of 1975. And we escaped the communist takeover of southern Vietnam. We had very little with us. We came here, and our food story was one of adaptation, one of how do we preserve our cultural identity and culinary identity through food. Luckily, there were Chinese markets available where we could buy things like these noodles. These are, because there's a lot of interaction between China and Vietnam. The Chinese were in Vietnam on and off for 1,000 years. They're our northern neighbors. And so these jiaza rolls that you may have had in Vietnamese restaurants presented to you as an egg roll. They're not made with an egg roll type skin. Traditionally, they were made with rice paper. And so we were able to get rice paper from Chinese markets. But they were really like old school rice papers that everyone would have to like soak in boiling water to warm up. And they were honestly a pain in the ass because someone would always have to like have this water boiling, and like we would say, boiling water, and run to the bowl and pour it in. But things have changed over the last 49 years since my family came here. And all of that has to do with migration, immigration, and integration of food. And so what I'm going to show you today is this modern way of making jiaza that does not require deep frying. It is oven fried, and it's not something I came up with on my own. And I'm just gonna like walk you through the recipe, and as I'm doing it, I'll talk about the evolution of the dish. And so the first thing that the dish requires are noodles, and these are mung bean noodles. And they look like they're completely inedible, but what you do is you soak them. They look like fiber optic noodles. You soak them very briefly until you can, kind of mess them around and they fall apart. And then you have to chop them. And the easiest thing that you want to do when you're chopping is to use a cleaver. If you're doing this in a large capacity, then by all means, you want to put it in a food processor. And you want it in short pieces, roughly 1 inch, no longer than that. And the reason these noodles are useful is that they swell up to absorb flavor. And this is an ingredient that even though we had when we came here to the United States, and my family would drive 1.5 hours to Los Angeles, Chinatown to stock up and then drive home, it's always kind of a crapshoot with Asian ingredients. And nowadays you can buy these noodles at a regular supermarket. So what goes in here traditionally are these noodles and pork and then mushrooms. So we've got like shiitake mushroom that's been soaked, and the mushrooms that we're using have been soaked for a good 6 hours. Don't ever let anyone tell you that you just pour hot boiling water over dry shiitake mushrooms and let them sit for like 30 minutes. They're just gonna be like rubber bands. If you let them soak overnight, they will be velvety, they'll taste expensive, and you will have been cooking while you were sleeping, which is what, as cooks, we all want to do, right? I'd love to make money while I was sleeping, but at least I can cook while I'm sleeping. And that goes through hydration. And then there are wood ear mushrooms. So these are what wood ear mushrooms look like. And they are very delicate and light, but they provide crunch. They also provide wonderful color and ebony quality. Shiitake mushrooms present an umami flavor and also a chewiness. Now, I'm making a vegetarian version of the filling today because, and grated carrot. Some people put taro in there. I use grated carrot and also green onions for color and also flavor. And then there's typically pork. I'm making a vegan version today because, after 49 years of being in the United States and now being middle-aged, I realized that I really need to double down on vegetables and appreciate them more in my health and in my lifestyle. And so I wrote my latest cookbook called Evergreen Vietnamese. It's my 7th book, and it's a flexitarian cookbook. And I took a look at how I could reimagine certain Vietnamese classics, but really putting vegetable front and forward. And the reality is, traditional cuisines like Vietnam's are based upon those vegetables being at the center of the plate. The meat, y'all, you know what? Tofu is fabulous. And I have chickpeas in here because Buddhist cooks would use chickpeas would use mung beans as a binder. We don't have chickpeas, although now we do because everything is so globalized in the food system. But they would use mung beans to really bind these ingredients and maybe some tofu. And then what I've done here to modernize things and to give it that just like umami edge, briny quality that is typically brought on by shrimp or crab in a jazza filling is to use nori. Seaweed is a thing in Vietnam, and not necessarily nori, but I'm just like, I'm just gonna put nori in there because I'm a Vietnamese American. And you have access to these ingredients, and why not put them to use? Because the thing in my world is to normalize these cuisines. I don't want them to be exotic anymore. I don't want to be exotic, and I want you to be able to share these flavors with people that you know, because young people, as well as older people, they all want these bigger flavors nowadays to be added to Western cuisine. So then we've got soy sauce, and then we've got a fair amount of pepper. Pepper is a Vietnamese spice that was present before chilies were brought by the Portuguese. And there's also a fair amount of salt. So we've got like half a teaspoon of pepper, half a teaspoon of salt. Sugar figures in to give that kind of salty, savory, sweet quality. And then when you are really working with Vietnamese food, for it to be not just authentic, but for it to be good, especially with vegetarian dishes, you want to push the edge a little bit with a flavor enhancer. And MSG is fantastic. And my mother buys it by the gigantic quantities, but so is something called mushroom seasoning granules. And you want to use the mushroom seasoning granules in a 2-to-1 proportion with MSG. So I would typically be adding, say, 1/8 of a teaspoon of MSG at a time. Here I'm doing like 1/4, and I'm gonna mix it all up. And the filling for jazza needs to be relatively dry. And when we mix it up, it turns out looking like this. I wish I could cook like this at home all the time, Rebecca. I need a little quarter sheet pan that we had out. So what we do here now is this. I'm gonna show you a little like Vietnamese method for making these rolls, for portioning things, thank you, is that you put the filling into a pan. This is a half batch that we made. So I'm just going to press that into a pan. And this allows us to portion very easily. Because if you were to go into a Vietnamese restaurant, and these would be made by a bunch of people, oftentimes women cooks, maybe because, they have patience and more dexterity, I don't know. Just saying women kind of rock, you know what I'm saying? In the kitchen and elsewhere. So I'm just going to press that in there, and I'm going to portion it out. This is a half batch, and so I am cutting it this way because it allows me to create quantities that I can then just not even guess at. Thank you. When I'm filling the rolls. So to fill these, typically I would use water and rice paper. And in Vietnam, if anyone has traveled there, you will see in the marketplace there is a lot of rice paper. And there are different kinds of rice paper for different applications. But in the United States, when you go, typically at your market, you've got like one brand. If you go to an Asian market, hardcore market, you'll see maybe 2 brands or 3 brands. At a Vietnamese market in Little Saigon, maybe like 5 brands. The brand that I suggest that people use, and I do not represent these people, although I should be paid some kind of remuneration, is by Three Ladies. Very consistent brand across the board in all their rice products, and they have been like the go-to brand. Also bamboo, Three Bamboo. So we like things in threes.
What do you look for in a rice paper? What are the qualities that are important to you, and why does this brand embody those?
Sturdiness. There are rice paper. First of all, rice paper used to be all rice, but now it's mostly tapioca because they changed the rice paper formulation so that they would soften faster. So when you look at the ingredients here, you'll see tapioca, filtered water, rice flour, and salt. So, rice is the third ingredient, but that doesn't mean that it's no longer rice paper. We just have more tapioca in it. And what I'm looking for is thickness and an opacity. And I want it to be sturdy. If you are making rice paper rolls that are going to hold up to like, because I know, Taylor, you and your family make goi guong, the unfried rolls, like twice a week. These rolls, kids can handle them. You can train them on these. They will also hold for quite a spell for service and for parties and whatnot. And for my purpose here of making these rolls, they allow me to treat it almost like a phyllo pastry. Because when I was trying to figure out a better and more healthful way of creating jazza without frying, and my brother had come to me and said, air fryer's a really big deal. Can't we make these in the air fryer? And like he started throwing my mother's rice paper rolls in the air fryer, and he ruined our Thanksgiving one year. And he's the only son, so we had to say, that was really good. But they were so chewy and hard. I was like, my God, I think I'm chewing on a Ziploc bag. So I was like, you know what? Just to protect our family's future gatherings and events, I would like, at least for his sake and for my sake and for a lot of my cookbook readers and newsletter subscribers, come up with a better jazza that's healthful. And it's also doable by many people. And the method is to brush fat on the rice paper. And what is in here is coconut cream, a little molasses as a colorant, and vinegar to adjust the pH a little bit. Now, in Vietnam, and for some of the rice paper brands that are made for deep frying, they say that you want to add a little vinegar to create a crisp cooking process. So that's what I did, and it just really magically turned these rice papers into something that will bake up very nicely. You had these yesterday at the 2:30 welcome reception, and those were baked. They were not deep fried, and they can hold. These rolls can be frozen, uncooked, and what you're seeing me do is to just do my, kids slathering of this sweetened, or not sweetened, but colored coconut cream on there. And the reason why I landed on this is that I was trying for about a month making deep fried rice paper rolls at my home. And when I deep fried them, I realized they weren't really soaking up a lot of oil, but they busted. They would literally explode because tapioca in hot oil expands and gets very chewy. And then all of a sudden, it's got like this blistered bubble. And it's floating like a balloon in the oil, and I can't keep it in control and submerged. And what happens is I was like, this is not going to work. How can I normalize making jazza if I can't even do it at home and make it easy for people? So this guy here has a little, crack, and I'm just going to leave it there for you because it doesn't matter. And the whole thing about wetting rice paper and making sure that it is soaked enough, you want to wet it minimally. One of the issues that cooks have about rice paper is really like wetting it for too long. You don't want to keep it soaking for a long time. And then once that you have, if you were kind of, you want to deal them like playing cards in Vegas, you would have them arranged like so, and then you can place the filling on there. And ideally, the rice paper would soften a little bit more. But as you can see here, by portioning the filling the way that I did, I got a head start. And I want to place the filling in the lower third of the rice paper. Whether you're going to deep fry these or whether you are going to make a roll that, thank you, that you are going to eat right then and there, stay in the lower third where you place most of your goodies. And I'm going to wait here and bide my time, Taylor, because I'm waiting for the rice paper to soften a little bit more.
So can I ask you some questions?
Yeah.
All right. One of the things that we had a great conversation yesterday, and one of the things that was really interesting to me that emerged from our conversation was this idea that Vietnamese cuisine in Situ is actually a hybrid cuisine. It's a fusion cuisine because of the legacy of colonialism. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how its fundamental relationship as a fusion cuisine has allowed it to be flexible and allowed for Vietnamese chefs to incorporate new ingredients and change techniques over time.
Fusion, when I first heard it, I was like, yeah, we've been doing it for like thousands of years because Vietnam's a little skinny country. And like the state of California, it's got a long shoreline. It's shoreline that's approximately the same as that of the Atlantic shoreline. And so there's been a lot of incursion from the borders, along the sea, from the northern part of the country, also interactions with people from Laos, Cambodia, Thailand. There are Indian artifacts in southern Vietnam too. And then the French, the Portuguese, the Americans arrived. So much trade was going on in Vietnam because there was like a huge amount of natural resources, rubber, minerals. And so what happened is a lot of Vietnamese people, in order to survive, they learned to adapt and to take the best of what was given to them, presented to them. For example, the baguette. Originally, the baguette were called bánh tây, which means Western bread, Western baked goods. And then it was integrated so much into the Vietnamese diet that they just said, oh, well, we're just going to drop the Western part, the word tây, and just call it bánh mì, a baked thing made out of wheat. And now it is the sandwich, the quotidian sandwich, that can go in many different directions. And later today, I'll be demoing a version of bánh mì that most of you have probably never had, but it's very popular in Vietnam. But this taking of what foreigners brought to our country and then really appropriating it and making it our own, that's our version of cultural survival. And we're going to go, all right, how are we going to make that bread rise so nicely in a tropical climate? We find little ways to do it and manipulate it and whatnot. And then, butter would be fabulous in bánh mì. We can't afford it all the time, but we can make mayonnaise. And then we're going to put our own cold cuts in there. But shoot, that pate is a pretty good idea. And what about Chinese char siu pork? And then we're going to put a little pickle in there and some fresh vegetables because we like vegetables. And all of that becomes part of the signature Vietnamese repertoire. Same thing with pho. All of this is bringing all these things together. And these, I suspect, had something to do with Chinese spring rolls. And the Vietnamese are like, we don't have wheat, because Chinese spring roll wrappers or egg roll wrappers are wheat-based, more like a sheet of pasta, in a sense. Whereas the Vietnamese didn't have that much wheat growing. We can't grow wheat in our tropical climate. So they're like, we're going to make it rice-based. We got a lot of rice. We have to transform rice. We're always undergoing the transformation of rice in Vietnam. And then we are going to call these some other name, Jaza or Nam Rang, if you're a northerner. And then we're just going to say, it's ours.
Yeah. Do you think that ability to assimilate, that tendency to be able to be flexible and incorporate different things has made it easier to adapt Vietnamese cooking to the American context?
Completely, because, Vietnamese people got here and we looked around and we're like, oh, we can survive, because I think that's good. Because there is, when my family got here, we saw that there was Chinese markets nearby, fresh herbs like cilantro and mint. There were chilies because of the Mexican element here in the state of California. We had no fish sauce at the time. And so at the end of the line, we were like, we can just make this work. And so the thing that I want you all to know is that rice paper can't sit out for too long, and it becomes very stiff. But theoretically, these would have softened up, and they would have been baked up. And so one thing is that when you're working with rice paper, they are not something, you want to keep them air fried. I mean, you want to keep them covered, okay? And so that is not exactly the way they come out, but we put them on a baking sheet with a rack there, and then they bake up like so. And they are super duper crispy. When you take, these were par baked and we just reheated them in a 425 oven, and while they're cooling, you can make the nuc jam dipping sauce. And nuc jam dipping sauce is oftentimes prepared with lime juice, but a lot of Vietnamese cooks nowadays use vinegar because lime juice is so unstable. And I use agave instead of sugar because it melts so beautifully. And I add a little bit of apple cider vinegar because it gives it a beautiful fruity quality and also stability, and a tiny bit of lime juice. And at this point, I would very much taste it. That's good. And then I'm going to use vegan fish sauce that I make. And to make this, I've got pineapple juice. I also rehydrate kombu and wakame to add a piscine quality. And then there's garlic and chili garlic sauce. You can use fresh chilies if you like. And I have mixed this sauce up so much in my life, I know that's the color I want because I want an amber color. And I will dish it up like so. Once that you have this, the base of the sauce, you can, if you want to, add a little bit of carrot to it. And what this does is it sweetens it up. So if you're going to use carrot in your nuc jam dipping sauce, make it a little bit on the tart side because it will sweeten up. And we are going to take the rolls and cut them up. Use scissors, or in this sense, we're going to use my knife. And if you've got, convection heat, by all means, use that. These rolls, when they come out of the oven are very, very hot, and you want to really cut them up so that they release steam. And put them on your plate. And then you add your lettuce and herbs. Have your lettuce and herbs already prepped ahead of time so that they're ready to go. And what we have here is mint. We also have cilantro, Thai basil if you want to, but it's not necessary to obtain it for this. And also I brought some homegrown herbs by way of tirto. The thing that I wanted to mention to you is California and many parts of the country, such as the American South, are extremely conducive to Vietnamese cooking because so much of the herbs can be sourced very, very easily. And thank you for listening to my presentation.
All right, what do we got?
Hello. Good morning, almost. Great to be here. I will start with the first rice dish while I try to kind of tell a bit of a story and a bit of a history, but I'm open to have all the questions that you have.
Yeah.
I have two rice dishes here to demo, and the idea behind this demo is not to show how to cook the rice. It's about the couple of techniques that it's very specific in Iran. We have two rice dishes. One is mostly for lunch and dinner, and the other one is for breakfast rice. So the pomegranate rice that I'm gonna make is the technique of mixing rice with other ingredients and cook it all together. So cook the rice or parboil the rice and then mix it with other ingredients and put it back on the stove and cook it slow. But I'd like to start with a bit of a history about the rice while working on this. So the technique here is simple. We layer down the ingredients. In this case, we have already jasmine rice cooked with turmeric, pomegranate seeds, golden onions, and some melted butter, which we could use a normal butter as well, but this might be easier. After we do this, we wait for at least 30 minutes to the flavors get combined and things cook together, and we serve it. But while I'm doing this, I just like to talk a little bit about the history of Iranians with rice. Iranian been introduced to rice via Silk Road from the countries of China and India for centuries after centuries. And rice was a very high-end, luxurious ingredients for them for centuries. You could only find rice in like kings' palaces and courts because Iranian were wheat eaters. Where Iran is located, which I like to call it West Asia, is where they started farming wheat, and they've been eating wheat in a form of noodles, bread, and porridge. I know there is always this debate where the noodles come from, so there is a big region in between in West Asia that they think that the noodles come from them. But for the rice, they've been trying to kind of cultivate rice for centuries, but they were not as successful. So what was happening is they've been using rice just for rare occasions, or you could find rice in wealthy people's plates. There is there is a time that it seems that Iranian got more rice, so probably rice would come more through Silk Road, and there was this challenge between eating rice and eating wheat in different ways. There is a book of poetry which is all about ingredients and food from around 10th century. There is an interesting chapter in that book that is about the battle or a war between traditional Iranian noodle and the upcoming saffron rice. At the end of the story, the saffron rice wins the battle. And that shows that the shift in the Iranian culture of accepting rice and eating more rice. Now, Iran is one of the countries in that part of the world that they eat wheat and rice basically in the same amount. But what has happened after that is much more interesting, because in a matter of few centuries, you see that there is another cookbook from a Safavid court or a palace, which has 4 chapters dedicated to rice. And you find more than 50, 60 recipes around rice. To name a few simple ones are this mix of rice and other ingredients, as you see here, from like pomegranate rice to sour grape rice, to walnut rice, to chestnut rice, to fish roe rice, to sour cherry rice. All these mixes of ingredients with rice that is mostly and usually eat with a type of meat. They have basically invented their own technique. So what I'm showing now here is called, the dish is called anar polo, and the technique of doing this is called polo. So polo is basically mixing rice with other ingredients and cook it together. That word might sound a bit familiar to you, because if you move from Iran or West Central Asia to the West, you see the other words close to that. You see paella, you see pilaf, and you see pilavi and all those words, which is basically the same technique of mixing rice, but using sometimes different tools. The idea is the reason that Iranian could finally become a rice-eating culture plus wheat is they've been trying to kind of cultivate rice, but they were not successful. But around 500 years ago, they have found a region in their country that is very well conditioned to make rice, and that is northern Iran, where I cook the food from. So northern Iran is a southern side of the Caspian Sea, the largest lake in the world, and it's surrounded by the Alborz mountain chain, which is the highest mountain chain in the West Asia or Middle East. So the weather, in contrast with most part of that region, in northern Iran is subtropical. So they could grow rice in farm scale, and they could have enough rice to eat as much as they wanted, rather than just waiting for the rice to come from the Silk Road. And they became eating rice a lot more. But and that happened for us Iranians with another ingredient as well, which is a black tea. So Iranian rice and also black tea is a hybrid of Chinese rice or tea and Indian rice. So it's not a basmati and it's not a short grain rice. It's something in between. The rice that I can find here, which is closer to the Iranian rice, is the jasmine, mostly Thai jasmine rice. Tastes very close to the Iranian rice, and also the shape is the same. So, so here, as you see, I have just did a few layers of these 3 ingredients. You know, we Iranian cook everything with golden onion, and in this also dish, this will give a much better flavor. So you could use any other type of berries or sometimes other fruits with the same technique. Sometimes you need to cook them before, like the other dishes like the quince rice or the apple rice. So you saute the apple or quince and then you mix it. With any other beans is the same technique. Sometimes we add different types of herbs or different types of spices also to this mix. But this is a very simple dish, just pomegranate and golden onions, but we let it cook for at least 30 minutes, sometimes more. If we want to create that crusty part at the bottom, we add more oil at the bottom and cook it a bit longer, then flip it up and have that crusty part. Interestingly, that bottom of the pot is not that common in northern Iran because they eat a lot of rice, 3 meals a day, so they don't care to kind of create that elaboration most of the time. But it's one thing which is very important to say is rice become popular in Iran, and in the past 100 years, kebab and rice is the number one restaurant-style food for Iranians, inside Iran and outside Iran. But that's just a very small category of Iranians eating rice. We have many, many different ways of eating rice, but in the past 50 years in California, Iranian kebab shops been popping up all over and been the only place for non-Iranians and Iranians to experience Iranian cuisine. There have been projects here and there that have been trying to kind of break that down and serve other dishes. My friend, Chef Haas, who was here earlier today, he was doing this for the last 20 years in his restaurants in San Francisco. There are a few other restaurants in East Coast and my restaurant also in San Francisco. We are trying to kind of not serving kebab and rice and show other parts of our cuisine. Although for us as a northern Iranian restaurant where more than 90% of the rice that Iranians are consuming grow, we have to keep the rice. So we've been serving rice dishes without the kebab and sometimes and many times without even meat, vegetarian and vegan rice dishes, to just bring that other side of our culture up and present it to mostly non-Iranians. So that will be done, and we will just do it later. But if you want to have any questions, then I can go for the second round.
Yeah, I mean, the story is fascinating. How in Situ, the cuisine of Iran, which is an old cuisine and has deep historical roots, has been able to evolve over time, and it sort of begs the question for me. When you brought Iranian cuisine to California, what did you find, and how were you able to evolve the cuisine to the ingredients of California? Are there things that you can't get here that you would love to be able to get? Have you found new things that you weren't familiar with in Iran that you've been able to incorporate into your cooking?
Well, yes, we have learned a lot in the past 9-10 years starting this project, but one thing was we always wanted to stay dedicated to the recipes and the ingredients that are being used in northern Iran or are from northern Iran. But interestingly, to answer your question, the weather and the climate of northern Iran and northern California are very similar. So we have a lot of common ingredients and the key ingredients from our cuisine that grows here. Pomegranate being one of them, walnuts, all the different herbs and fruits like quince, apple, and all these different ingredients that we use a lot in our cuisine, all these wild plums. And northern Iranian cuisine is all about foraging. Still, there are people that they forage on a daily basis without even knowing the word foraging exists. That's what they do to gather wild ingredients. Many of the wild ingredients I found it here as well. The example is Persian hogweed, which it's so rare, but where I live in East Bay Area, the common hogweed, which is very close to Persian hogweed, grows all over the East Bay Hills. And all the different types of wild plums that we use to make it different molasses also grows widely. Many of our wild herbs, from like different types of wild mint to different types of wood sorrels that they use a lot in northern Iran, also you can find it here in Bay Area. But you know, talking about the borders, Iran been in a conflict with the West, mostly America, for the last 40 years. So we cannot bring any ingredients officially, cannot import any ingredient. So that has been a challenge. And there are ingredients, like, you know, Iranians use a lot of different molasses or paste, not just the pomegranate molasses, from different plums to sour orange to sour apple and quince. And that is a very key ingredient for us to use. But we cannot bring it here. So we started thinking, what can we do here for ourselves? So all these wild plums in the spring, we turn it into a paste for ourselves and use it in our cooking. But there is only one ingredient that I bring in my suitcase when I go back to Iran, like few liters of it, which is a sour orange paste. It's so hard to make it and so expensive even to make it here. So we bring that ingredient and use it, you know, drop by drop for specific dishes.
I have a lot more questions, but I also just want to be conscious of the time here.
Sure.
I know that you have another dish that you want
Yes.
to...
So this dish, as I said, it's a breakfast dish. So they use a leftover sticky rice from the night before and mix it with some ingredients. This dish is called mamajukul, and it's a farmer's dish. They eat it mostly at the farm. And it's interesting because you can see the traces of the East Asian cooking in it, but also some very important characters of Iranian cuisine in it too. So they have this spread that I have here, and they all mix it their own small bowls, and they eat it with hand, which I'm going to show you how. So they basically... in northern Iran, they eat sticky rice. This is called kate. So it's not, the rice is not parboiled, it's just one pot cooked to be fully cooked. So you see all these ingredients, but the very main one is always a cheese. It can be a goat or a sheep or a feta, which is, the real feta is a mix of goat and cheese milk. The cattles are mix of goat and sheep. And the shepherd at the evening or the afternoon, when they want to milk them, they don't separate them. You know, they milk them all in one container. So they add cheese. This is like hard-boiled egg, chopped. Walnuts soak in the water. That's all they always do. They add few walnuts. Different types of seeds, from nigella to hemp. Which these two are very popular in the north, but also it can be sesame as well. Some nigella seeds. Some dried fava beans soaked in the water overnight. It's not cooked. I know it might sound a bit different to you, but it tastes nice. Some of these. And you mix it a little bit together. I think I have to add a little bit more of the eggs and the seeds. So at the farm, they basically make this in a shareable platter or a bowl, and they all gather around and eat it with hand. but I'm gonna plate it for you. Do a bit of a restaurant style thing. So I can do this in here. So you see, you know, mixing the walnuts, the cheese, the fava beans, and the seeds with the rice is very, very much Iranian, or very much from that side of the world. But the egg is something very, no, yeah. So they eat it with, always they eat it with fish rolls, but if it's the time of fishing, they have the fresh fish rolls. If it's not, they have this. Here I have a botarga, but there is a salted, cured fish roll in northern Iran, which you can find it on any tables. It's called ashpel, and they, it's a Caspian kutam white fish roll. This one is a mullet, so this will add a lot of umami, and this might look and sound very East Asian. And then if they have a ready fish roll, they would do this also, a fresh fish roll. And interestingly, in northern Iran, fresh fish roll at the fish market is very cheap. And that was a very great challenge for me here, cooking the dishes, knowing that the fish roll, fresh fish roll, is so expensive here. You know?
Is it from the Caspian Sea, or is it?
Yes, from the Caspian Sea, yeah. And they always have either fresh garlic or green garlic or pickled garlic. This is not this trendy black garlic. This is a 7-year-old pickled garlic that it turned black and turned sweet. So they always have some. I brought this just for this presentation. And then any type of radishes or daikons is always on a table. They have it. And you may know that Iranians, we eat a lot of herbs with our food. So that is basically the northern Iranian breakfast rice bowl. And then the rice will be ready after a few minutes of cooking. So it was the same thing layered down. So I'm just gonna leave a little bit of the rice here. And they serve it with different types of meats most of the time. It can be goose or duck or quail or squab or chicken, or goat and lamb. But here, I think it works well with these gamey birds. Here we have some quail, which we stuffed basically with the same ingredients last night. And I was about to just serve the quail on its own, but my friend Haas, yesterday we were in the kitchen, and he was like, why don't you stuff it to be more beautiful for the presentation? We had enough time to do it, so that's what we did. And you know, we Iranian, we eat a lot of nuts. As you see, nuts is all over. So this is a mix of toasted walnut and almond, which add a crunch and a flavor. And then, as always, some herbs, but this is just, again, like the way that we serve in a restaurant. But for us Iranians, there is always a bunch of mix of herbs on the side of our dish, and with every bite, we have a bite of herb as well. Just to not lose the time, to eat this, in northern Iran, they eat rice with hand, and they have their own technique, which is called palamoshte. That means hand-shaped rice. So there is no sushi masters or sushi restaurants in northern Iran or anywhere in Iran to serve Iranian food. But here at the farm, they do it themselves. I just want to show you how they do it, because for me it's always very interesting. So they use their fingers, they keep some of the rice like this, and then they put it inside their hand and they shape it like this. When you shape your hand like this, it's called mosht in Farsi. So they shape it like this, and they add whatever ingredients that want more on top, like let's say a daikon or a below a fish roe, and they eat it like that. So.
Well, Hanif, I've got like a dozen more questions for you, and my CIA colleagues probably thought I was going to jump out of my jacket when you started talking about foraging, but we'll have to do that during the break because we're out of time. I want to bring Andrea up one more time.
We do have time for one audience question.
Okay, great.
So we did have someone who asked if you were trying to flip the rice out to show the crust, would you use a different pot? And do you use the method of placing a towel under the lid?
Yes, both. If you want to use these pots, you have to add a lot of oil underneath the rice when you layer up the rice to make sure that the rice will flip. And then, yes, if you use the towel will absorb the steam, and the rice will be flipped much more easily.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Chef Phil from Pied de Terre Restaurant in Fitzrovia, London. Today we're preparing a white asparagus bavarois with pickled green strawberries, Piedemonte hazelnuts and lovely nasturtium leaf. The idea is using all of our trimmings and being resourceful and making sure we're zero waste as a restaurant and celebrating all this fabulous produce we're lucky enough to have. In the restaurant we were using just the tips of the asparagus, and the rest of the beautiful asparagus was just surplus going to star food, and I really want to celebrate this incredible ingredient. So it's a completely vegan dish, but we make basically like a kind of panna cotta with the white asparagus at a base, using vegan cream, some oat milk. And then with the dish, we have pickled green strawberries, which make a nice glaze over it. So we've cut the bavarois. What I'm gonna do now is we just shave some beautiful Piedemonte hazelnuts over the top of it to give a nice nuttiness, and nice like toasted hazelnuts kind of give a brown butter feel to like vegan food kind of things, which beurre noisette's one of my favorite flavors. So, you know, even without the butter, you can still have that. So this is the disc, the asparagus bavarois with the green strawberry glaze. So now I'm just gonna add a Maya lemon gel, just to give a little bit of acidity. And that's gonna help us build everything up in a beautiful way. Half toasted hazelnuts go on top of our little gel. Our lovely roasted white asparagus that's just been gently blanched to get a bit of softness, and then roasted on the barbecue for a lovely caramelized flavor. We're going to build up to kind of give the height as well. Beautiful pickled green strawberries, which used to be discarded, and because they're not sweet and they're more of a savory product. And we found pickling them to give an amazing acidity, which I believe acidity to be a seasoning of food, just like salt and pepper. And it's got a really firm texture, and it's just Also something a bit different and a bit interesting. Finally, we finished that with some beautiful nasturtiums that are grown less than 100 yards from the building. We have an amazing man and we're working with him to grow different things. We grow sorrels, we grow all of our herbs because I just kind of got used to it before. And in the end, we end up with a beautiful asparagus bavarois.
Castilla y León is an incredible land. The truth is that we would have loved to stay longer. But as the song says, the show must go on. So, off to our next destination, Castilla-La Mancha. Land of legends, knights, windmills, Don Quixote de la Mancha, and the award-winning filmmaker, Pedro Almodóvar. And of course, the land that gives its name to one of the most iconic sheep milk cheeses in Europe, the PDO Manchego cheese. Want to know how it's produced? Us too. And thanks to Samuel's kindness, we were able to discover it. Samuel gave us a personal visit to one of the most modern and innovative factories in Southern Europe. We toured the different warehouses with him, and we were able to see all the phases of the making of Manchego cheese. We learned that for a cheese to be called Manchego, it must be made with milk from Manchego sheep. In addition, all of them include an embedded case inflate on the back that guarantees traceability.
So pay attention to this label. It always has to say Manchego cheese.
And also to this one. That's the European logo that recognizes quality products. We also learned that the minimum maturation time for Manchego cheese is 30 days. And we were even able to see the structure that give it that characteristic relief and texture. Do you know what that's called? Pincho.
Besides the Manchego cheese, in Europe they have other delicious sheep milk cheeses, like the Castellanos,
The Idiazabal.
or the Zamorano.
So as they say here, you will never go to bed without learning one more thing. But before going to sleep and ending our third day of our road trip, we were able to taste the incredible Manchego cheeses in an amazing setting. Ready to play? Discover the European cheese stories at cheesestories.eu. Funded by the European Union.